I let Grace in. She's so.
Good morning, Grace.
Hi, good morning.
Nice to see you. Well, to hear you, I guess. We will see. There's so many people signed up, and yet it is 11. I don't know what to do. Funny. Grace, you joined us before, right?
Yeah, I think I tried to click on the link before and then my phone bugged out.
You attended the workshop on Wednesday, right?
No.
Oh no, different Grace.
Yeah, is that weird? It's true.
I remember now the last name was different.
It's a good name.
Hello, Elizabeth. How are you?
Hi, good morning. I am well, still coming alive though, so my camera will be off. Good morning, Carmen. Good to see you. I'm joining because we're going to host a college prep night tomorrow in Spanish.
Okay.
Sorry, Monday night. And so I just wanted to see what I could glean from this, since we'll be helping with some FAFSA and WAFSA too.
Great. Yeah, we're going to talk about both.
How did the last few
Recorded too?
The first one went really well. The second one had a pretty low turnout, but we had good conversation with the students that did attend.
Oh, good. And I did promote it to our Hispanic population to hopefully get some kids in, but I was hoping it might be recorded, but you're not recording for posting on the website in the future?
We are. We recorded the first one, and then I screwed up the second one, which was about Naviance, and then the third one, it was just really 2 people, and so it wasn't really appropriate to share that with the world. So, but this is getting recorded for sure.
Okay, great.
For sure. I'm a little cold. Just came inside. It's actually so nice outside. I can't. I was trying to send an email. I cannot believe this. It's insane.
One little note, Carmen. It wasn't obvious to me when I went into Eventbrite. I saw the countdown 3, 2, 1. It said it would be starting, and then I waited for a few seconds, thinking, okay, why isn't it starting? And I then clicked on the gray box in Eventbrite, and that's what opened the Zoom link. But there wasn't anything telling me to open a Zoom link.
Yeah, the gray box wasn't intuitive.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you guys are talking about. So that must be because of, it must be the new thing, because I made it an online event. Not usually that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And the emails you got every, the one you got 10 minutes ago just has the link, I think.
The link takes you to the Eventbrite site.
What?
And then it says countdown, and then it counts down event is starting, but then there's just a gray box and it doesn't start. And so I thought, what's wrong with this? So I clicked on the gray box, and that's what brought me to this Zoom link or to this session.
Interesting.
So I just hope that that's not right, keeping others from joining.
It could be. I'm sending it out again right now. Now. Grace, did it make sense to you when you did it or no?
Yeah, that made sense.
You're smart. Okay, well, I don't know. Some of you, Nicole, was it you who registered 1 minute ago?
No, I was about 15 minutes ago.
Okay, but you're the last register. Because I was like, wait, 2 hours before there was 25 people, then it was 26.
Yeah, I was just having it message me the URL.
Sorry, I guess I think it's the same one for all of them is what I think I did.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't tell you that, so then there's that. Well, I can say that.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Ooh, here comes Sandy. Got lots of grown-ups. MR, is that what we'd like to be called, or do you have a name you prefer us to reference you by? Mohammed. It says MR iPhone, so we're like, Mr. iPhone. Mr. iPhone.
That's
It's just like Mr. Robot, but in a good way.
Exactly. That's not a crazy show. I'm a season behind.
It was.
Thank you. So Sandy Hayes is a good friend, and she is the She's actually hold on, Sandy help, LSAT advisor sometimes. What do I call
I
it?
was like 6 years ago.
Well, still, I'm a
Haven't
little
done it in a
behind.
while. But yes, I used to do that.
Mhm.
I so thought I was going to be off camera. So I am not physically prepared.
You are off camera then.
I
Yeah,
can't
know
see
that,
you.
but I'm keeping it off because I am not prepared. I really thought I was just going to sit and listen.
Yeah, well, this is what's interesting is that we had a great showing right after school or that first one, and we did a Wednesday and nobody even like remembered to check their email. And then now we've got 26 people registered for something that started 6 minutes ago. So it's just so
Well,
interesting.
I have to say it was a bit more complicated than I would have liked to get in.
That's what I just heard, that there's a gray box or something.
Well, and I had to create a password. I don't know. I was like, well, this is taking more work than even I am willing to do.
That's so interesting. I don't know. It doesn't work because I'm already in the Zoom. Like, I think it's because I used the option to make it a online event in Eventbrite. I probably won't do that again. I'll just keep setting up the link. I think that seems to be what made it more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So, Elizabeth, I feel like we should make Sandy a meme so she can have a meme like yours. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's a Bitmoji, so you need a Bitmoji, Sandy.
He does. I love my Bitmoji.
I
Grace,
do too. I think they're fun.
I think it's the best ever.
I use them a lot with my daughter.
Okay, there you go.
So Grace, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're interested in learning about financial aid and kind of what year you are in school?
Yeah, I'm a senior this year. My counselor had sent out a video on like how to apply for the FASFA, but I was just a little confused, so I figured I'd sign up for this.
Cool. Yeah. And so what schools are you looking at applying to?
Mostly community colleges until like the whole virus thing settles down. Then I'm gonna probably try some universities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you looking at like Cascadia or what community colleges?
Cascadia, yeah. I haven't looked much further than that, but
Cascadia is fine. There's unless you're looking for a specific program, like the nearest community college to people tends to be the one they pick.
yeah.
Although with online classes, you have a lot of options, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I say we wait just another minute or two and then just do it because I'm super excited and I know the information, you have a lot to cover.
Yeah. So, I mean, we might just go ahead and start talking. We have another person here.
All right. Woo! Yeehaw!
Hello. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Shanawaz Sabuwala, and I'm a parent of Haider Shanawaz. He's 11th grader at Inglemoor High School.
Nice.
Great. Well, we're really glad you're here. And then, I think Mohammed dropped.
Oh, we lost Mohammed? Wait. Oh, you probably, what? Something else is there. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Carmen. I'm the Northshore Schools Foundation Director. I wanted to introduce you to Nicole, who's brilliant. Earlier this month, is that right? Or late last month, Dr. Reed reached out and said, we've been hearing from some seniors that just said, hey, we'd love some support. So we put together a series of workshops. This is the final one on the schedule. We're still working for another one with the Scholarship Foundation actually will come in, but Nicole's been here kind of answering questions. This will be recorded and she is brilliant and I'm just gonna let her take it from here. Currently, we are expecting another 20 people, so we'll see what happens. But Nicole, take it away. I mean,
Sure.
Tell us who you are and start from the beginning if you don't mind.
So my name is Nicole Gunther. I work at the UW as an advisor working with social welfare students, and I have a background in college access work and thinking about like financial aid and scholarships and college choice and where students end up accessing higher education. I did my undergrad at UW and then my master's in human development and learning sciences at UW as well. And so today we're just going to talk about financial aid and the application process for the different applications that exist. The FAFSA and the WASFA are the main ones to know about. And then we're going to talk about what financial aid resources are out there and are kind of the most common need-based aid, and then some about process of applying for scholarships and resources that you can utilize to kind of build what access you have to scholarships to kind of fill in gaps in your financial aid award. And I really want to kind of cater the content that we focus on based on the needs and interests of the people who are here, so that you get the most out of it. So let me know if you have any questions that can guide our conversation. And I can also like screen share and walk through different websites with you, really wanting to make sure you get your questions answered. It looks like we had a person join us, M. Reman. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, this is Mohammed.
Oh, okay. You came back under a different.
Yeah, I'm joining through my laptop versus my iPhone, so.
Gotcha. Okay. So why don't we start by just talking about the FAFSA, and then we can talk about the WASFA after that. So the FAFSA is basically the federal government's way of assessing each student's financial capacity and resources to pay for college and thus their financial need, because we haven't allocated enough financial resources kind of as a country for us to meet the financial need of all students for higher education, right? So we have scarce resources and we need a way of allocating those resources as fairly as possible. And so the FAFSA basically produces something called an EFC. And that is a number that estimates how much your family can afford to contribute to your education. So expected family contribution, it's not a bill, it's an estimate of what that student's resources are or resource potential. So if you do the FAFSA and you get an EFC of 5,000, that's an example. It can be anywhere from 0 to 999,999, almost $1 million. So most people are clustered on the lower end of that, right? If you have an EFC of 0, that means they estimate that you need your entire education costs covered by financial aid, that you don't have any money to put towards it. If you have an EFC of 5,000, they think you and your parents could contribute about $5,000, versus say you have an EFC of 200,000, they think you can cover the whole cost yourself. You don't need financial aid. So there's that whole spectrum there, and the FAFSA estimates the EFC. And so when you fill out the FAFSA, you get that EFC right away. When you hit submit, it automatically comes up on your confirmation page. But it's buried in small print and it's not explained or emphasized what it is. So it's kind of hidden under the confirmation code. But so make sure you pay attention when you submit your FAFSA, you'll have that EFC there. And that can give you some information that you can then bring to college websites and financial aid calculators and see what can you expect, 6 months later when you get a financial aid award. So any questions about EFC or the FAFSA so far?
When is the best time to apply for FAFSA application?
Yeah, so it opens up October 1st of the year before the year you want to get financial aid. So if you are the parent, or if you're a senior in high school or the parent of a senior, now's the time. It opened on October 1st and it's good to get it done rather than procrastinate it. So financial aid priority dates will then vary by different colleges. So University of Washington priority date is January 15th of the year before that coming school year. So for the next school year, students are doing their FAFSAs and WASFAs now, and the priority date is this coming January 15th. And it really makes a huge difference to meet the priority date. So you want to make sure that you're on top of that. And it varies a lot by different schools. So community colleges tend to have later priority dates, usually maybe 2 or 3 months before the date of that quarter starting. And they tend to have quarterly priority dates instead of annual. So you want to look, if you have a list of schools that you're considering, you want to make sure that you look up and are on top of the priority dates for each of those schools. So on the FAFSA, you can choose 10 schools to send your report to. And so you want to put in all the schools. If you have more than 10, you can go back in. Once it's been processed, you can go back in and change them and have it sent to additional schools as well. But most people don't need more than 10.
Is there a difference between in-state and out-of-state college tuition to be reimbursed through FAFSA?
That's a good question. So it's federal. It's a federal application, so it's used in all 50 states. You can get the Pell Grant. So the Pell Grant is the federal grant that students are eligible for. And that can be used in any state, and it would be the same amount. So it's, I think the max is a little over 6,000 this year. And that amount is set by Congress every year. So that 6,000 could go to any state. But then states also have financial aid programs. And so in our state, that's the Washington College Grant. And that actually has been expanded recently. And it's really great because they don't run out anymore. They used to run out and have tons of students that would meet the criteria, apply and not get it because it had already been spent. But now every student can get it if they're eligible. So that would only be for in-state schools, is my understanding. So if you went to a school in California and you were a high need student, you could get the Pell Grant, but you couldn't get the Washington College Grant. And that can be up to 11,000. So that's a good chunk grant. So at different colleges, it ranges the max from anywhere from around 4,000 up to around 11,000. Okay, so we're thinking about the FAFSA. We have our EFC number that we get when we do the FAFSA.
Just 1 second. You mentioned October 21st. Was that the date?
October 1st.
First, okay.
Sorry, I misspoke. Yeah,
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we apply for FAFSA application, since that application is being submitted, 9 months prior to the college start date, if the financial situation of a parent changes between that time, going up or down, how does that work?
Yeah, so it's even more than 9 months. You submit the FAFSA using your tax return information from the previous year. So the FAFSA that people are doing this fall, they're using their 2019 tax returns. And so this year, that's going to be interesting for a lot of folks, right? Because a lot of people have lost their jobs, have reduced their employment, dealing with, kids being home from school. They may not be able to be working the same, or their company may have closed. So what happens is you submit your FAFSA or your WASDA using that old data. And then you have to work with the financial aid office at the school that you end up attending to appeal that information and say, I have a reduced income. Can you reevaluate my financial situation? And they can, based on the policies of that school, can do a revision. So at UW, for example, if you have a reduced income of 25% or more, you can file a petition to have it reevaluated. And students often, in my experience, have seen significant increases in their financial aid, or they reduce their EFC significantly based on that. So we've got your EFC, right? So the FAFSA tells you what your estimated contribution is. And I actually want to pause here because we've had a few people join. And I just want to hear quick introductions, who you are and what your role is, if you're a senior in high school or a parent, or kind of where you are. Looks like we have Michaela, Cooper, and Latoya. And then, hi, Cooper.
So I'm not Cooper, I'm his parent, but
Oh,
he
okay.
uses this computer all the time. I'm Brene Brooks. I have a senior this year, and I have a younger student that's going through. So I'm interested to hear more about the FAFSA and how it works and etc.
Yeah. What was your name again?
It's Brene, like Renee with a B on the front. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Lisa. I'm Michaela's mom, so her name is showing, and I also have a senior, and I appreciate your talk and your time today for us.
And then Latoya, is that you or your parent?
Hi, I'm Latoya. I'm a parent of a senior. So I just said, well, let me try to come in here and see if I can get any information today.
Great. And then Yusuf, I believe you came to the first workshop as well, if I remember correctly. It's a little hard to hear you. Oh, there. All right. Well, I'm glad you're all here. And please speak up with questions as you need to. So we are senior year, or the year before you want to go to school. So if you wanted to take a gap year, you'd need to do it during your gap year. You'd do the FAFSA or the WASFA. And right, so far we've been talking about FAFSA. We will talk about WASFA shortly. So you do the FAFSA or the WASFA in the fall, and then you make sure it's sent to all the schools that you might want to attend. And then they take that information, and for the students that are admitted or offered seats, they create award letters. And so they have a total cost of attendance estimate for their school that includes tuition, room and board, books, travel, miscellaneous personal expenses, and it comes to kind of an estimate of a total for that academic year. What does that student need for all of their expenses based on averages and cost of living in the area and that kind of thing. So that might be, say at UW, it might be $28,000 or $29,000 for the academic year. Tuition is for in-state is only about $12,000, but it includes all those other expenses. So that's the cost of attendance number. So you might see that on like financial aid websites, cost of attendance. So that varies a lot from school to school, because if you have a community college where the tuition is only $4,000 or $5,000 for the year, you have a private school where the tuition is $50,000 for the year, it's going to vary a lot. But they all have cost of attendance that will vary from school to school. And then they all would try to give you aid to fill as much of that cost of attendance as possible. So you have the cost of attendance, and then your EFC is going to be a chunk of that. It could be $0 of that if you have high need, not a lot of resources available to you. It could be that your EFC is bigger than the cost of attendance, in which case you're not going to get offered any need-based aid. So your financial need is whatever that difference is between your EFC and the cost of attendance. So that will vary at different schools. So if a school's cost of attendance is only $15,000 and your EFC is $20,000, you don't have any financial need there. They assume that you can afford it. If your EFC is $15,000 and the school's cost of attendance is $60,000 at a private school, you're going to have financial need of like $45,000 a year, and you may get grants to fill at least some of that. Does that make sense? Do people have questions about that? Because that's an important kind of concept around your cost of attendance, your EFC, financial need, and then financial aid that tries to fill that gap. Okay, I'll assume that makes sense.
There's a question in the
there's a question in the chat. Yeah, let's see. When filling out the FAFSA, you're supposed to put down the names of all the schools you want to attend. Yes. So the FAFSA is you giving information to the federal government. And the government, the FAFSA then has to send that information to all the financial aid offices at the schools that you want an award from. Otherwise, they don't know to make you an award letter. So having your FAFSA sent to a school is the equivalent of requesting financial aid from that school. Otherwise, they have no idea that you want aid. And so they have up to 10 slots where you can put in the names of schools that you want them to send your information to. When you're doing the FAFSA, some key concepts to think about. There's the idea of being a dependent versus an independent. And that's really important in terms of whether or not you report your parents' financial situation. So most students, I would say, if you're a high school student and you live with your parents, most of you are going to be dependents. So that means you have to include your parents' financial information, because the schools and our government assume that your parents are going to be financially contributing to your education. That's an assumption that works fine for a lot of students, is really, really difficult if you are not actually receiving support. It can put some students in a really tight spot, but that's the assumption from our system, is that through the age of 24, you are a dependent. There are some exceptions to that. So if you are in the military, you're considered an independent. If you are self-supporting and you have a child that you provide 50% or more of the support for, then you're considered an independent. If you are homeless, if you've been can be verified to be homeless or to be self-supporting and at risk of homelessness, then you can be considered an independent. Let's see. I think those are the main. Oh, if you're married is the other one. So other than those kind of scenarios, until you're 24, you have to include your parents' information. A question, do we see FAFSA application having any negative impact on school admissions decision? Typically, no. So they would be a separate process. At some private schools, they are not need blind. So that concept of being need blind is what you're kind of asking about. So that would be something to look at on the school's websites. I would say in the majority of, that's not going to impact your admission at a public university in Washington for sure. Or obviously a community college is open enrollment, but there are some private schools that, because they have such high tuition and they have what they have in terms of endowment resources to give students what they need, they may not admit fully in a need blind way, because otherwise students wouldn't be able to afford to come. So they don't want to admit students, thousands of students that are not able to afford to go there. So you would want to look on the school's website and see what they say about whether their admission is need blind. Does that answer your question, Mohammed? Okay. All right, so going back to thinking about being independent versus a dependent. So if you are a dependent up through age 24, you're putting your parents' information. So people often have questions about parent information. And which parent. I know we had a question come in advance about about parents that are separated or divorced. There are some complicated scenario, if this, then that, and this scenario, do that. The basic question about who is my parent. So it's your legal parents, your biological and or adoptive parents. So your parents as determined by the state. So who's responsible for you? So if you were adopted, the other independent criteria I forgot to mention, if you were in foster care, even one day past the age of 13, then you do the FAFSA or the WASDA as an independent. So if you were adopted through foster care past your 13th birthday, you don't include your adoptive parents' information. You apply with just yourself. So a website that I want to highlight here, that's a really good resource, is studentaid.gov. And so they have tons of resources. It's the government website on financial aid. And so it focuses on federal financial aid, but it has a lot of kind of just explaining the concepts. So you won't find information about WASFA on this website because that's a state application. But if you're doing the FAFSA, you can learn a lot about FAFSA questions on studentaid.gov, and that will be reliable information. Don't wander around on .com websites because they can have outdated information or they can be scammy. For a lot of years, FAFSA.com was this scam website that would charge you money to file your FAFSA. And the government finally bought it and had it forward to FAFSA.gov, so it stopped scamming people out of so much money. So you want to be careful to be on reputable websites for this information. So for parents who are divorced or separated, so if they still live together, you include both of them. If they are living separately, then you would put the parent that you lived with the most for the 12 years or the past 12 months. So even if it was like 1 day more than the other, you would put that parent. If you lived exactly the same amount of time, then you would put the parent that provided more financial support. So those are the kind of the two deciding criteria. Any other questions about parents? It doesn't matter if you live with someone other than your parents, say you live with your aunt and uncle or something, you would still include your parents' information unless the people had legally adopted you. One question that comes up sometimes, and I doubt this is going to be the situation since you're being proactive and coming to a financial aid workshop, but if a parent is not willing to provide their financial information for the FAFSA or WASFA, that really puts students in a very difficult situation. So if you're a student here and you're not sure if your parents will provide their information, this would be relevant to you. You would want to follow up with the financial aid office at the school that you want to attend. And see what petitions they have to be considered independent, because typically those are very difficult to get approved. And the reason is that a long time ago, like decades ago, they didn't have this rule as firmly, and you would have parents saying like, oh, I don't want to give, the student would just move out and they'd be living independently and then they'd get financial aid for school. But the parents could be millionaires and the students are then getting resources that other students need when like that's their only option for school. So now it's a lot more like a parent refusing to give information does not mean the student will be declared independent. It just means they might only get loans in limited amounts. So a lot of students that I know that were in that situation, they ended up like going to community college part-time while they were working until they were 24 and could get financial aid as an independent. So that can create an awkward 6 years of lack of eligibility.
Nicole, I think sometimes parents are going to be reluctant in our community to share because they're worried that that information will get shared perhaps with Homeland Security or some of the other agencies. What assurances does FASFA give that it stays within FASFA?
I haven't heard of any cases of information being shared related to citizenship status or anything like that. I mean, the IRS already has the information in most cases if people are doing their taxes. So there's an IRS data retrieval tool that people can transfer the money, the information about their money from the IRS to the FAFSA. But yeah, I haven't heard of any cases. We usually, tell parents that it's protected private information. And I think that would have been publicized if there had been cases where that information was used inappropriately.
Okay, I am so regretting I did not have this when I went through this with my 3 children, but that IRS tool, can you share that in the chat box? That sounds like the coolest thing.
Yeah, so it was created in, I think, 2010 it's been a while now, but we didn't have it when I did the FAFSA the first couple years as a student, and you had to get your tax return, you had to put in all your information, you could make a mistake on it. One of my friends, she was like, called me because she was like, why is she was doing her FAFSA for her 2 sons, and one of them's EFC was like 10 times the other. She was like, what is wrong here? And she had accidentally put her husband's income on her son, and they calculate that extremely differently. So they might estimate that a student's income, a third of it could be contributed to the EFC. So a student makes $10,000 working part-time, they're going to estimate maybe 3,000 or 4,000 of that can be used in the EFC. Whereas it's a much smaller for the calculation for the parent. So the IRS data retrieval tool, it lets the government talk to itself instead of using you as a middle person. So you've got the IRS office, you've got the FAFSA office, and you just go in, it's built into the FAFSA, so you can't miss it. It'll ask you to do it. And you'll put in your social security number, verify your address and stuff, I think. And then it just gives permission for your information to be sent from the IRS directly to FAFSA. You don't even get to see it, because there were some scammers that were using the IRS data retrieval tool to file people's tax returns before they got to it. And then there was bad things happening with people's tax returns being taken. So a few years back, they tightened up the security on that. So that has the added benefit that if parents do that IRS data retrieval transfer, students don't even necessarily see their parents' income information, which has been a point of sensitivity for some parents that prefer not to share their earning information with their children. So they now don't even really have to do the FAFSA.
So can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So when you use that data retrieval tool, it still feels like you're like, it goes into this black hole, and you don't know as a parent if it was submitted correctly, or you just don't. There's I guess some concern about whether or not it accurately reflects the family's ability to pay.
You just have to trust that you did your taxes correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and that was stressful the first year it was like that, because people are used to it populating all of their dollar amounts and stuff into the FAFSA automatically, and then you could see it and be like, yes, I made that much. And it stopped doing that because people were using that information to file tax returns on other people's behalf. So now it's like behind the scenes, and so it's a little weird, but it's definitely recommended to use it, because not only does it make it like error-free as long as you did your taxes correctly. So you get your accurate information into the FAFSA, right? Also, you are then much less likely to be selected for verification. And that's a super hassle process that you don't want to go through if you can avoid it. So financial aid offices will select people for verification to reduce dishonesty or, accidents happening. And so some of that is random, but a lot of it is based on different kinds of red flags, such as choosing not to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Why don't you want to use the data retrieval tool? Is your information that you're putting in different from what you put on your tax return? Would be the question that it would prompt. So then you might be then required to get your physical tax returns mailed, submit them to the financial aid office, and like it can delay your aid. So definitely use the data retrieval tool if you're eligible to do so. I think it's good for kids to fill it out themselves. I think it's best to be a project together, just because it is everybody's, social security numbers and information, and it's good to have everybody know what's going on with the process. But I think it's good to have students involved, because if a parent just does it, then, in future years, it probably will continue to be a responsibility of the parent, or the student might be like, I don't know, it's overwhelming. And it's good to have students have a kind of a sense of ownership over their own processes that impact their schooling. So I think doing it together is kind of what I would most recommend. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the WASFA and make sure we have time to talk about that. So if you think about the FAFSA, no, I don't think it asks you to do any math. So the point of the data retrieval tool is that it does all the math for you and pulls it from your tax return. So the WASFA is basically an application that's parallel to the FAFSA that is for eligible undocumented students who are residents of Washington, either having lived in Washington for 3 or more years before earning their high school diploma or GED, or being eligible for DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And so it is hosted on readysetgrad.gov/WASFA, which I'm going to type in the chat here. .org, sorry. No, here, I'll just copy paste this here. So you're going to not do both. So you would do one or the other. So if you're eligible for FAFSA, you would do the FAFSA because that would give you access to federal financial aid as well. And that would be for citizens and some eligible non-residents who have like long-term permanent residency. The WASFA has a survey at the beginning of it that walks you through your eligibility. And if you're actually eligible for the FAFSA, it'll tell you go do the FAFSA. So if you're not sure, you start with the WASFA and it'll tell you. So then it asks very similar questions to FAFSA about your resources. I think has parallel, dependency kind of standards. And then it gives access to state financial aid. So the Washington College Grant that I talked about earlier, which is up to about $11,000 a year at the more expensive schools, that would be something that students who do the WASFA can access. So that is really important to talk about to make sure that students know about the WASFA. The other really important piece of financial aid application for undocumented students to know about is the HB 1079 form. So that stands for House Bill 1079. It was a law that was passed, back in like 2003. It's been a while now. And it basically says if you're an undocumented student who has lived in Washington State for 3 years or more before graduating from high school, you should be considered an in-state student for the purposes of calculating tuition. So if you've been living here, you've been paying, sales tax, you live here, then you shouldn't be paying out-of-state tuition at our colleges. So what you do, there's a one-page document that you print out and you sign, and it's basically called an affidavit. And it's basically a promise that you will become a citizen if you are eligible to do so in the future, and that you promise this is true, that you have lived here for the required amount of time, uninterrupted. So, and then you submit that to the college registrar at the school that you've applied to. So you could submit that to all of them that you've applied to. And that will go in their system, and you'll be coded as a resident instead of a non-resident. And that makes a big difference. So for UW, for example, the admission rates for in-state students and out-of-state students are significantly different. They give priority to in-state students. And so I would get that submitted early so that when they're doing their review between December and March, that they're reviewing your application as an in-state student. And that will also mean that you'll pay like $12,000 a year instead of like $35,000 a year or something for tuition. And it would include you in Husky Promise. If you're eligible for FAFSA, are you eligible for the Washington College Grant? Yes. So the FAFSA gives state aid and federal aid, and the WASFA just does state aid. So that's why FAFSA is preferable, because it gives access to the Pell Grant of around $6,000 max as well. But very important for undocumented students to do the WASFA if they're eligible. I'm going to, I'm going to put the link for HB 1079 in the chat. So that is main information about HB 1079. Any questions about WASFA or HB 1079? So you would turn that in to the university that you've applied to.
Nicole, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Is that obvious and linked in the WASFA? The form?
I believe so. Have an application guide on how to complete it. I'm going to link that here. It doesn't mention it on the thanks for coming, Mohammed.
Thank you. Bye.
It asks you to verify that you meet HB 1079 conditions, but I'm not seeing that the guide includes like the form itself. It might. It's been a little bit since I actually went through the WASFA. So I'm not sure what this year's interface exactly includes in terms of that. So if you are working through it with a student, make sure that there is somewhere that says HB 1079 and gives the form and instructions, or you can supply that separately. But it's very important that they do it. Otherwise, there'll be an out-of-state student in the system.
Okay, great. I will look through that more thoroughly to see if I can find it. Thank you.
So the affidavit needs to be filled out for all residents to prove your residency, or is it only for people who are undocumented?
It's only for people who are undocumented.
Okay.
And so I think it's really important that everybody know about it, because you never want to make people out themselves in order to get the information. So just telling every student about it as a default, and then most of them will be like, oh, this doesn't apply to me.
Okay.
But yeah, if you either are a legal resident in terms of having a green card or different visa statuses that allow you to be here legally, you would do the FAFSA, or potentially not be eligible for either if you were like an international student on a visa. But if you're undocumented, then the WASFA would be the one you would do, and the HB 1079. Okay. Other things that I wanted to make sure we talk about. Do people feel like you have an understanding of what kinds of grants? Maybe let's talk about award letters. So timeline wise, in October-ish, October through the fall, you're doing the FAFSA or the WASFA and having your financial information sent to each school, right? And so then the schools will prepare award letters for the students that are admitted that have submitted financial aid information. And in the spring, typically, you'll get that award letter. So the award letter would include the big picture of it is what's the cost of attendance, what's your EFC, what's the difference, that's your financial need, and then what grants can be awarded to you to fill that gap. So for UW, I'll just talk about that since what I'm most familiar, but it's would be similar at other schools to varying degrees. So there's something called Husky Promise, and they basically say if you are eligible for Pell or state need a Pell Grant or Washington College Grant, and you're an in-state student, you're pursuing your first bachelor's degree, you can know that you will get enough grants to cover tuition. And so I think WSU also has something called the Cougar Commitment, which is similar. And so you can look on their website and look at the Cougar Commitment and say, okay, they say if you're generally, if a family of 4 and you have this income level, you can be confident your tuition will be covered by grants. So you can look on the financial aid website for different schools and see if they have something similar to this. And so they would piece together, okay, so say you have an EFC of 0, you would get the 6,000 or so of Pell Grant, you might get the 11,000 or so of Washington College Grant, that's 17,000. Remember that cost of attendance is like 28,000. So then they might put in some institutional grants, money from the school, and then they might offer loans for the difference. And so at that point, you get this award letter and it says you get this and this and this, and the total is this much, and your unmet need is this much. That unmet need isn't a bill. So students often will think that's what they have to pay out of pocket, but that's not the case. That's an estimate. And so that might mean that, remember that cost of attendance number, that includes things like parking or electricity bill or your food for the month, your rent. And so if your cost of attendance is 28,000 and they're giving you 22,000 in financial aid, you then have, so remember then tuition is like 12,000. That's like $10,000 extra that will be coming to you to help you pay your rent, pay your food, pay for textbooks, all of that. So you want to remember to piece out, okay, how much is tuition? That's what I'm actually paying the school. And then anything extra, you divide it by the 3/4, and you can expect that to be in direct deposit into your bank account to help with paying for bills. So that extra unmet need would only be something you'd have to pay to like your costs of living. If they're living in a dorm and it's like 10,000, then it would be money you'd have to pay to that residence hall bill. Any questions about that? People often also have some questions about loans. So I could talk briefly about loans. So you're never obligated to accept loans that are offered to you. You can accept the grants and reject the loans. You can accept part of the loans. You can accept the better loan of the ones you're offered. So they're for the federal direct loans, which are the best ones of all of the loans. There are subsidized and unsubsidized. And basically for the subsidized ones, there's no interest until after you stop being a student. So either you graduate, you drop out, then the interest starts accruing at that point. For subsidized, then you could take out a $5,000 loan, and then when you graduate, get a job, be aggressive about paying it off, and pay very little interest. Or even pay it off while in school and pay 0 interest. For the unsubsidized, the interest starts accruing when you take it out and goes up while you're in school. But right now the interest rates are so low that the interest wouldn't be super significant. Let me just, I think it's 2.75. Yeah, this year the interest rate is 2.75% for the Stafford loans. So that's like lower than it's ever been in the history of this loan program. And then for graduate students and Parent Plus loans, so that's the less good kind. So you've got the subsidized Stafford loan is kind of the best because the interest doesn't start right away and it's lowest interest. Unsubsidized is the next best. So if you only need a little bit, you take your subsidized, reject your unsubsidized, right? And then the Parent Plus loan, that is higher interest. Right now it's 4.3, which isn't bad in general. Historically, it's been more like 6.5. And so if you have a higher EFC and not as much financial need, you might find that you're offered unsubsidized loan and Parent Plus loan. If you only need some of it, you take the unsubsidized loan at the lower interest rate and reject the Parent Plus loan. often the award letters do not say the interest rates on them, and they don't explain the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized. A lot of award, they've gotten better, but a lot of award letters are extremely confusing. So you have to figure out the terminology and know what the different things mean and the interest rates and the payment options to be able to make an informed decision between, you know, accepting this or rejecting that or accepting all of it. So you want to, you can use that studentaid.gov website to make sure if you're choosing between different types of loan that you know what they mean. And the interest rates are set by Congress every year. So they change January or July 1st every year for that school year. They are fixed for the life of the loan though. So Congress changes the interest rates, but that's for loans that are dispersed during that school year. So if you take out a loan next year, it would be at whatever interest rate Congress sets this July 1st for the life of the loan. For loan repayment, it's a default of 10 years. So if you get to larger loan amounts, then they start defaulting it at 25 years. There is a student aid loan calculator that you can use. Sometimes people get really nervous about loans, but there's this handy little calculator that you can put in. I'll put it in the chat here. You can put in numbers and ask, okay, what will my monthly payments be? So if I take out $8,000 of loans and it's at a 2.75% interest rate, default loan term of 10 years, we're gonna put 0 loan fees. Sometimes there's like a $25 distribution fee or something, but they're not very much. And the default minimum payment is $50 a month. So then our monthly loan payment in that scenario is going to be $76. So these kind of horror stories that you might see on social media about like, I couldn't buy a house because of my loan payments. You know, they were $1,800 a month. And you know, that is a bad situation, right? That's most often if a student is going to like a private school that doesn't have a lot of need-based aid, or they aren't eligible for it, or they went to a graduate program that was very expensive and loan heavy, and they're taking out like $150,000 in loans or something. If you're taking out, you know, $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year, your monthly payments are going to not be that high. So you can use that as a tool to kind of just do a check on like, what are the implications of this? Because it can really make a difference if you graduate and you have $700 a month loan payments for 10 years, like that can impact your ability to buy a house or, you know, save for retirement or different kinds of things like that. So that's a helpful tool. And in that scenario of taking out $8,000 in loans, your total interest paid is about $1,100. So it's not astronomical. And that's over 10 years. All right, any questions about loans? You can always pay them back early for the federal loans. There are also private loans through banks and such, and those are a lot usually higher interest, and there aren't as many protections for students. So for the federal loans, if you encounter economic hardship, you're unemployed, you're sick, something happens, you can go into forbearance where you pause payments. Interest will keep, you know, creeping up, but you don't have to make payments for that economic hardship period of up to 3 years. You also can do income-based repayment. So you can do the standard payments where it's equal each month. You can do graduated payments where it's like small at the start and then bigger towards the end of your loan term. So if you're like going to be a doctor or something where you expect low pay at the start, maybe you're doing your residency or something, although if you're in school, you don't have to make payments while you're in school. But maybe your career starts low pay and ends up higher pay. You can do that graduated type. You can also do income-based, where, you know, it's a certain percentage of your income. Any questions?
Nicole, I was wondering, do you fill out the FAFSA every year in college or just once?
Yes, every year, October 1st. So then once you're in a school, you would know when the priority date is for the school you're in. And you would do it sometime between October 1st and your priority date. All right. Well, if there are no questions, we can wrap up. We can also stop recording if people have individual questions they'd rather not have distributed. That we've wrapped up the main content. So
I'm going to stop recording now. Thank everybody for coming. This will be and the first one will be out on our YouTube channel and probably on a blog post at the Northshore Schools Foundation. So thank you so much, Nicole, and thanks for joining us. And please stay on if you have individual questions, but otherwise have a great Saturday.